Good afternoon. This is Rachel Wilson from Education US at Columbia. And we are excited to have you guys joining us today for our webinar with Penn State University Dickinson Law. If you can hear us and see the screen, please write in the questions box or in the chat box to let us know that you can see and hear the transmission. Wonderful. Looks like people can hear and see. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Sarah Guillen, who is the representative from Penn State University, and she will be talking a bit about how to take your law career to the next level with an LLM, specifically using the Penn State program as an example. So Sarah, thank you so very much for your time, and we're looking forward to learning a bit about LLMs in general and specifically at Penn State.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. And my apologies if there is a little bit of delay with my audio. We tested it a little bit ago and it seemed that perhaps there's a little bit of a lag. So please go ahead and just listen to my audio and ignore the video if they don't quite match up. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. As Rachel introduced, my name is Sarah Guillen. I oversee the LLM program here at Penn State Dickinson Law. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why you should consider getting an LLM degree, specifically in the United States, and what to look for, things to consider as you're looking at options and trying to figure out what the best program fit might be for you. For every person, it's going to be quite different. And so we're going to talk through some of those things to consider as you're making this decision. All right. So a couple things just first and foremost to consider when selecting an LLM program. And I'm going to go into a little more detail with all of these, but just as kind of an introduction, some things to consider. First is location. As you probably know, the United States is a very large country. Every region, every part of the country is very different. And so you want to consider location when you're making a decision if you want to be the big city and more of a rural area, and somewhere that has access to the big city but still is far away enough that it has a lower cost of living. These are all things that you want to consider as you're selecting programs and potential universities to study. The second thing is looking at the curriculum. So for some of you, there may be a specific area of law that you know that you want to study. For others, you may just be looking for a general LLM degree, which would allow you the opportunity to get kind of an overview of what the legal system is in the United States. So those are two different ways of looking at the curriculum options within an LLM program. I would say from what I've seen here at Penn State Dickinson Law, it's about 50%, 50% of incoming students who know they want to get a concentration LLM in let's say public interest law versus students who come in and say, I just want to get a general overview of law in the US and they want to do a general LLM degree. So it is really a personal decision, but you'll want to kind of figure out if there is a specific concentration you're looking for or if a general program may be the best fit for you. Next is internship and externship opportunities. So this is the out of the classroom experience. So you're learning, reading a lot, as anyone who's been in a law class in the United States can tell you. You're learning all the time, and so this is your chance to put it into practice, kind of in a real world environment and setting. You'll also want to think about how you're going to be integrated into the law school. And then also connected to that, what support is going to be offered to you once you get there. These are really important things to think about. I think sometimes applicants to LLM programs in the US don't consider this enough when they're making a decision, but integration into the law school is a very vital part of your overall experience. If you are coming to the US because you really want to learn US law, I think hand in hand with that has to go learning about US culture and the US environment. And so the integration piece is really important because that's your chance to engage with the domestic students, the students from the US who can help to introduce you to the US cultural pieces of that. Support services is more so who are the staff who are taking care of you when you arrive on campus. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, that is myself. I, working with the LLM program, work with students who are applying once they're accepted, once they're new admitted students, overseeing orientation programming, programs that we offer throughout the year. So other schools, they may have a couple different staff who do the same thing. So what you'll want to think about what support services are offered to you and making sure that you feel comfortable that you're going to be taken care of while you're here. Next are networking possibilities. So how is being in the United States for one academic year going to set you up professionally to have a broader network for your career long term? So we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can utilize alumni networks and other outlets to help you expand that network while you're here. And lastly, finances. I think this is always an important factor for a majority of prospective students. You want to consider the financial piece. So what is the tuition fees and scholarships available for all these different programs? So I mentioned location. Location is key. So to use us as an example, here in the top left is a map of the United States. As I mentioned, there's a lot of different states, and each state is going to be very different and offer different opportunities for you regarding its location. So here in Pennsylvania, we are located in Carlisle, which you can see in the photo directly to the right. Is kind of in the lower southeast part of the state. We are about 20 minutes south of the capital city of Pennsylvania, which is called Harrisburg. You can see it there with the star. And so with our location, it's very unique because we are extremely close to some of the big cities. As I mentioned, about 20 minutes away from the capital city of Harrisburg, and then within 2 hours of Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., about 3 hours from New York City. So extremely close to some of the biggest legal markets in the United States, but also far enough away that the cost of living is less expensive. So as you're looking into where you want to be and what your budget is with your finances, I think you need to consider where it will be in relation to the cost of living. Because being in one of the biggest cities in the United States, you're going to pay a lot more for your housing and your meals than you will necessarily being in somewhere that's a little bit more disconnected with a lower cost of living. So as you're looking at locations, you'll want to look at where are you in relation to those markets, and then also what are the opportunities for you as far as activities and getting connected with the community. So here in central Pennsylvania, we have a lot of outdoor activities, skiing, hiking, bicycling, but these are things that you'll want to kind of consider as you're investigating where you want to apply. So I mentioned legal markets. I just want to touch on this a little bit more. So within the United States, there are certain markets that are the biggest in the entire country as far as the number of legal positions that are located there. New York City, as you may not be surprised to know, is the largest legal market in the United States. And as I mentioned, it's just under 3 hours away from where we are in Carlisle. All of the bubbles are major legal markets in the United States. So as you're looking at where you want to be, whether that's the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, you'll want to think about, try to visualize a similar map to this, where you're looking at where the nearest legal markets are. Legal markets matter to international LLM students because that opens opportunities for you as far as internships, externships, research projects, and also building your network. I think it can be a really powerful thing to be able to meet with alumni of the institution you're studying at, maybe do some job shadowing, some just basic introductions. If you're close to those big cities, that means there's a lot more possibilities for you to network. So as you're thinking about legal markets as well, you want to think about what courthouses or what capitals are potentially nearby. As I mentioned, with our international students here, many of them, once they finish, they take advantage of what we call OPT, which stands for Optional Practical Training. OPT, if you come to the United States and you finish your LLM degree, OPT offers you a 1-year work extension basically, to get some work experience here before you return to Colombia. So if you come and you do 2 semesters, if you graduate with your LLM degree and you apply successfully through OPT, you are eligible to stay and work in the United States for up to 1 year. So many of our international students are able to apply and be considered for opportunities such as being a clerk in one of the local courthouses that we have nearby. Because of our proximity to Harrisburg, that opens up some possibilities that are not available if you're a little bit further outside of the capital. But you want to think about what legal markets, courthouse opportunities, capital cities obviously are going to offer a lot of opportunities as well for not only OPT work experiences after you graduate, but also for internship and independent study projects as well. So the last piece with location is experiencing US culture. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this is a really important part of your experience in the United States, getting your degree. It's not only learning the legal side, but it's really important to understand US history, US culture in relation to how that can help you be more familiar with the US generally speaking. So where you're going, you'll want to think, what can you experience culturally in that part of the country? As I mentioned, every part of the country is very, very different. Different history, different ways of speaking, different foods that they eat, similar to Colombia, where the different regions you go to can seem very different. So here in Pennsylvania, we're known for having a lot of history. The Battle of Gettysburg is located just about an hour from us here. As I mentioned, Harrisburg, the capital city, is there, and Hershey, Pennsylvania. Most people have heard of Hershey chocolate. So the home of Hershey chocolate is just about 30 minutes away, and there's a lot of activities there as well. So these are things, may not be the most important things you're considering, but make sure you're thinking about US culture and what opportunities are for you to travel, to experience US culture while you're here outside of the classroom. So the next piece to really think about as you're making a decision is the curriculum. So for the majority of LLM programs within the United States, they are going to be similar credits in a similar length. So for the most part, a typical program will be 24 credits, which is 2 semesters, about 12 credits each semester over the course of 1 academic year. So most programs will start in the fall semester. Typically, this will be August or September. And some programs do offer a spring start in January. Here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we do offer a spring start as well. So it is your choice if you would want to start in the fall or the spring. I typically recommend to students to start in the fall if they have the choice, because that's when the majority of our other students are starting at the same time. So it can be a little bit easier to get connected and make friends upon their initial arrival. And then the next thing that we mentioned earlier is the concentration offerings. And if you were looking for a concentrated degree versus a general LLM degree. So here at Dickinson Law, similar to all of those typical curriculum requirements, a little bit more about what we offer, and I would say the majority of LLM programs in the US would offer similar things as well. So a high-level understanding of US legal doctrine and analytical methodologies. So this is probably one of the main reasons why you're considering an LLM degree in the United States, is to gain this understanding. Interdisciplinary research, I think, is another really important part of this. Typically, our LLM students work really closely with our faculty on research projects. We do have work opportunities for LLM students to be either a faculty research assistant or some kind of administrative role assistant, where they're getting this experience as well as getting paid for it as well while they're a student. Experiential learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these things you can look for in different programs outside of the classroom. And then lastly, the immersion in class with JD students. So our LLM students, for the most part, maybe with the exception of 1 or 2 classes during the year, you're going to be taking all of your classes with JD students. So these JD students, they're in a 3-year law program that is kind of the foundational law degree in the United States. And so you're immersed with the domestic students, learning the same content that they're learning, engaging with them, connecting with them. This is something, as you look at programs, you want to make sure you're finding out if your classes are only going to be with the LLM students or if you're going to be immersed with the JD students. I think it's a very different type of learning environment, depending on if you are immersed with the US students versus you're only taking your classes with the other international students. So that's something to consider. So concentration areas, I've mentioned this a couple times so far, but let's say that there is a specific area of law that you know that you want to pursue long-term. It may be worth looking into getting a concentration within an LLM degree while you're in the US. Here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we do offer a number of concentrations. I won't read all of them off to you, but they're listed here on the screen. And there are a number of other areas as well, as I'm sure you know, that are not listed here. And so that doesn't mean that you shouldn't come to Penn State Dickinson Law, but it just means that you wouldn't be able to take concentrated courses in that specific area. So the majority of our students that come in, they either have a concentration on this list that they're very interested in, or they come in and they do a general LLM degree, in which case they kind of customize their courses while working with me to make sure that they're meeting their educational goals and meeting our program requirements as well. So a lot of other universities and other programs will offer many other concentrations that aren't on this list. So if you know for sure that you want to do a concentration, you'll want to make sure that you check the concentrations of all of the institutions that you're looking at to make sure that they offer that for you. So a few other options with regards to curriculum that you'll want to consider. So some institutions will offer what's called a third semester of study. This is typically going to be appropriate if you know you want to take the bar exam. So for students who come and do a 2-semester LLM program, the rate of passing the bar exam is extremely low if you take it after 2 semesters of study. So for our students who come in, and that's a nationwide, within the United States, it's a nationwide statistic. So our students who come in who say, look, I definitely want to try and take the bar exam, whether it is just for the professional experience or because you hope to actually practice in the United States, we recommend that you extend to a 3rd semester. So during that 3rd semester, you're enrolling in additional coursework and you're specifically working to study and prepare for the bar exam. So this is something that we strongly recommend because we know the bar passage rate for just general LLM students within a 2-semester period is so low that typically we either recommend considering transferring into the JD program to have an additional 2 years of study, or to do this 3rd semester of study where you're really devoting that additional semester specifically to prepare yourself for that bar exam. So as I mentioned, along with that, transferring to the JD program is also a possibility. We actually had one of our LLM students from last year transfer into our JD program this year. So she is now in her 2nd year of the JD program because the 1st year of her curriculum and her coursework here applied towards her 3-year total degree. So that is another possibility. Sitting for the New York bar exam, as I mentioned, that is a possibility for our students. And typically we work with the New York bar exam because it is the closest in proximity to our location here in Pennsylvania. But the coursework that we offer is offered and meets the requirements of the bar exam regulations, which there's a lot of regulations. If you were to look it up, it would be very overwhelming and very confusing. But it's very important coming in, if you know you want to take the bar exam, you need to discuss it with the institution you're applying for. Because not every school will have people that are wanting to help you pursue that. There's a lot of paperwork involved. There's a lot of requirements with your coursework that you must fulfill. And so you must come in your 1st semester knowing you want to take the bar exam and preparing yourself for it. Here at Dickinson Law, we have staff who will help you make that happen if that's something that you definitely want to do. But just know that you need to have made a decision about that by the time you start a program, just because it's very difficult later on to make it possible to be eligible. And then I already mentioned OPT, or optional practical training. So this is offered for an F1 student, which tends to be the majority of LLM students who come, unless they are paid for through a sponsor program. Typically, they're coming on an F1 visa. And OPT is the option for you to stay and work in the United States for 1 year after you complete your degree. So these are some things that are typically available for students. Not every institution will offer all of these opportunities. So these are some of the ones that we offer for our students. But you'll want to make sure that you look into what options are available at other universities that you're looking at. So as I mentioned with the bar exam, we typically work with students who take the New York bar exam. However, there are other bar exams around the United States that you are eligible to take upon completion of an LLM degree in the United States. So depending on what region of the US you're interested in studying, you'll want to ask where their students typically take the bar exam. And as I mentioned, that for students who typically are looking at doing that, we have a couple options. One, I typically consider a JD program as the best possible thing. The bar exam in the United States is extremely difficult. So having just 2 semesters of curriculum and coursework is minimal, which is why the passage rate is so low. If you were to complete a full JD degree, that would certainly increase your likelihood of being able to pass that exam. And we talked about the 3rd semester extension, and then ensuring that the program that you intend to enroll in offers you the support to make this possible, because not every institution will necessarily do that. So integration into the law school. So looking at how you want to be immersed with the other students, this is a really important factor to consider. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, as I mentioned before, you are taking all of your courses with the JD students. So you're completely immersed. You may be one of 1 or 2 LLM students in that class, and the rest of them are JD. So this ensures that you are getting a totally authentic US law school experience. And so for you that are looking for a truly authentic cultural experience on top of that, I think being able to engage and immerse yourself with the domestic students here is a really powerful piece of your overall experience. So next is building your network. So how can an LLM help you build your network after you return home, or if you decide to stay here? So look at alumni networks of the institutions that you want to apply to. It's really important to see if there's an active alumni network in that institution. And you can actually find out this information before you apply, or after you apply, and before you decide if you want to actually attend. So here at Penn State, we actually have one of the largest alumni networks in the country. We have over 700,000 alumni literally all over the world. Our LLM alumni include all of the countries that are listed there. We do have some alumni from Colombia specifically, several from all parts of Latin America. So if it's important to you that you come to the US, you get your LLM, and you return to Colombia, it should be important to you to try and connect with potential alumni who are already in your area. You can ask them about their experience. You can find out a little bit more from someone from your cultural background's standpoint, what that was like. I would certainly recommend you find out what the alumni network is like, and specifically how active are they in your region of the world. So you can find out what our Colombian alumni are currently doing back home, how active they are, and potentially before you even apply, learn a little bit more about the institution and decide if it's the best fit for you. So I would recommend looking at this for all institutions, look at the alumni networks, look at how you stay connected with the university after you finish your degree. Because I guarantee once you get here, those 2 semesters are going to go so quickly, very, very quickly. And so it's important for you to feel connected, continuing after you graduate and you return home. So another thing to consider is the cohort size of the LLM program that you enroll. So LLM cohort sizes within US programs range from less than 10 to more than 200. So this is a very, very large range. US law schools generally, they tend to have kind of average sizes. And when you think of sizes, the size really impacts a lot of different pieces of your experience. So the size can indicate how large your class sizes are going to be. If you're going to be in a classroom with 150 other students versus 20 students, it will impact how easy or difficult it could be to get connected and build friendships with other people. It really impacts a lot of things. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we specifically do not admit more than 20 students every year into our LLM cohort. And we do this purposefully. We do this because we want every student coming into the LLM program to have the personal attention that they deserve. So as I mentioned, since I am the staff member who works with the LLM program, I know everyone by name and I am their first stopping point if they have a question or if they have a problem or a concern. I'm the person that is there helping them to go through that situation. So we do not have more than 20 students per year. So like I mentioned, there are some programs that have more than 200 students per year in the LLM program. And so think about what size you're comfortable with. For some students, they like to be in a really large cohort. And for some students, they are more comfortable with a smaller cohort where they know they're going to meet and know everyone very closely. So it's really a personal choice for you, and everyone will have a different fit that's most comfortable and most appropriate. So that's one thing that you'll want to consider is what size is the best fit for you. Here at Dickinson Law, we are very purposeful with our cohort size for LLM, but also for the JD. So typically for the JD cohort, so this is the incoming class of domestic students in our law program here, is typically not more than 75. So as you can imagine, every fall, we have no more than 100 new students all starting together. So there is a very, very close community that is established because of that small size. So as you're researching programs, ask the people managing the programs how many people are in the cohort and how many people are in the law school generally, because that can usually give you an idea of how large or small the classes will be. It's a very different experience for you to be in a classroom with 20 other students versus 200 other students. You get a lot more personalized attention. The faculty know you by name. They know where you're coming from. They know your background. And it makes for a very different learning environment. Faculty backgrounds. So as you're looking at programs, you want to look at where the faculty are coming from. You may want to look at the research backgrounds of the faculty, see what they're currently engaged in as far as research. This may be specifically important if you are pursuing a concentration area, and let's say that you have a very, very specific focus of what you want to do. If there's a faculty member doing that very same thing at a specific university, that may be a very compelling reason for you to apply for that program. If that is the case, I would certainly recommend you contact that faculty beforehand, ask if they are hiring any student workers for the fall to help with research, because there is a huge opportunity as an LLM student to get connected with the faculty and really learn a lot from their background and from their current work. So at Dickinson Law, we really value global experience and global engagement. And so the majority of our faculty have experience teaching or doing research overseas. A number of them are Fulbright scholars or grant recipients who have either studied or worked or done research internationally. And so that global knowledge they bring into the classroom. So even though you may be one of 3 or 4 international students in your classes here, the faculty are bringing that global perspective into their curriculum as well. So it is really, we pride ourselves on having very globally aware classes and coursework here at Penn State Dickinson Law. Next, staff support and student engagement. So I mentioned that every institution will have a different number of staff that work with the international students and a different level of commitment and programming that they offer for international students in general. So typically some of the common things that you might see as you begin to research programs, check and see if there's an international student orientation that's offered for you as an LLM student or an LLM student orientation that's offered. Typically coming in as an international student, there's a lot of things that you need that the typical domestic student may not. Things such as how to open a bank account, things such as how to go apply for a driver's license, how to complete a lease for a housing contract in the United States, how to get a cell phone. All of these things you'll have to go through and figure out as an international student coming to the US. So here at Dickinson Law, we do have an international student orientation that happens 2 days before the rest of the students come. So you go through orientation specifically designed for your needs. And after that's completed, then you join the rest of the domestic students in their orientation as well. So by the time you finish a week-long orientation, you have pretty much all the information that you need to start and have a successful degree here. So that's something that you may see offered in a lot of law schools. Make sure you ask if they offer that, if it's something you know, if it's a level of support you know that you'll need. Another thing that may be offered are LLM-specific trips or events. Starting next year, we actually are going to have a handful of trips specific for our LLM students. Because of our location being close to Gettysburg, Hershey, Lancaster, there's a lot of really great, amazing places with history and US culture unique to this region that we're going to offer for our students, our LLM students. So ask and see if they offer opportunities like that at other institutions. Intentionally small community means a strong community. So every opportunity and every club or organization that is offered for the domestic students, we always welcome our international students to get involved with as well. So there's a number of student organizations, events that happen, and so getting connected in those and not just spending time with the other LLM students is a really important part in you engaging in US culture and your overall experience. That's something to keep in mind. Mentorship programs, you may want to ask if this is something offered with the LLM programs you're looking into. Here at Dickinson Law, starting in the fall, we're going to offer an LLM mentorship program where we connect you with a LLM alum who is now living and working back overseas, and they will be kind of your mentor guide throughout your year. And so other schools offer similar programs. It's a really great way for you to build your network and get a little bit of professional and personal advice along the way. And then dedicated staff. As I mentioned, ask and see who the people who will be helping you get here and helping to get you settled once you get here, who will those people be? And I think it's important to have a face to go with a name. And so it can be really important for the schools that you apply for to offer webinars like this, where you get to meet the staff, ask them questions before you arrive. So make sure that you're considering all of these things as you're looking into the support that's offered to you as an incoming international LLM student. So tuition and scholarships, this is really important for a lot of our students coming in because, as you know, tuition at US institutions is extremely expensive. And so as you're looking at programs, it can be really important to figure out your budget. How much money are you able to put towards this LLM degree? And that budget should really include your tuition and fees, and it definitely needs to also include your living expenses. So your housing, is there health insurance that's required, food costs, transportation, all of that adds up. And so it's really important to have a very clear budget of what you know you can afford during that 1 year. So here, just to give you kind of an example, at Dickinson Law for this current academic year, the tuition price is 48,000 US dollars. The range of tuition price for LLM programs in the United States is a very, very large range. Sometimes can go up to 75,000 US dollars. So make sure that you're looking very closely at the tuition fees, making sure that you are aware of funding and scholarship opportunities that are available. And if it's necessary for you to have scholarship, make sure that you apply upfront if there's additional materials needed for that, and make sure that you communicate that to the admissions team. So when they review your materials, they can be sure that they are offering you everything in their power according to your candidacy for admission. So here at Dickinson Law, we do offer tuition scholarships up to 50% of the tuition cost, which is about $24,000. And another thing to note, I mentioned this before, but cost of living can range greatly depending on where you decide to live and where you decide to study. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, as I mentioned, we're very close to some of the biggest cities. The closest being Harrisburg, which is the state capital of Pennsylvania. But the fact that we're 20 minutes away means the cost of living is much, much lower. So the rent costs, the food costs, gasoline costs, if you decide to buy a car while you're here, or bus fees for transportation, all of that is substantially lower than if you were inside Washington, D.C. or inside New York City. The bigger cities are always going to have a much higher cost of living. So most websites on their tuition and fees portion of their website, they will list out what their tuition is, what their fees are. Additional fees might include if there's mandatory university health insurance that's required, if there are technology fees, if there are student activity fees, and then the cost of living. They'll usually give an estimate of what it may cost you for your room and board for a year. So make sure you're taking all of that into consideration when you're making your final decision in relation to the scholarship that you receive. So applying to LLM programs, every school is a little bit different. At Dickinson Law, we only accept applications through LSAC. And so you have to apply online, and you have to have your materials sent through the LSAC website, and specifically the transcript certification. This can be a little bit confusing because every school has different requirements. There are some other schools that offer LLM programs in the US that actually offer their own internal application process, and then some only accept it through LSAC. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we only accept through LSAC, but like I said, every university is a little bit different. So you'll want to make sure that you know the requirements for each institution that you apply. So a few considerations. If you are applying to a school that only accepts applications through LSAC, know that you are required to submit your transcript through accreditation service. So this is an additional fee that you have to pay. Unfortunately, there's no way around it because it is paid directly to LSAC and not to the institution you're applying. But basically what you're going to do is send your international transcripts directly to LSAC, and they have a team of advisors that are trained to look at your transcript and to certify and to translate your GPA and your grade report onto a US scale, so that when the staff here in US universities are reading it, they know exactly what your academic background is on a comparative scale to the US scale here. Just know that if you go through that process, which a number of schools who are similar to Penn State Dickinson Law, where that is a requirement, that can take potentially 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer, for that international transcript review to happen. So I can't stress this enough. If there is an application deadline, let's say of March 31st to apply for a program, it's really important that you are submitting your transcripts a couple of months before that to ensure that they're able to be reviewed and those reports can be sent to the schools before the final deadline. So some schools, their deadlines may have already passed. If you're applying to a school for the fall, you definitely want to know when the application deadline is. Here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we do accept applications a little bit later. If you would apply by the end of May, we would still review your application and consider you for admission. However, like I said, the end of May means a completed application, that we've received your internal transcript review, which means you really needed to have completed and submitted your transcript probably around now, so the end of March, because it will typically take 6 to 8 weeks minimum to get those reviewed. So just keep that in mind. A lot of students who apply, they don't realize that there is such a long wait for that credential service. So make sure that you're planning plenty of time in advance for that to take place. So the application materials, this tends to be similar across LLM programs. It tends to be an application that is specific to the university. So this can all be found through LSAC. You will submit a personal statement. Typically, I recommend this be 2 to 3 pages. Your resume or CV that's updated. Your transcripts, which, as I mentioned, will be submitted through LSAC. And then proof of English proficiency or a waiver. So here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we accept either a TOEFL score or an IELTS score, depending on which exam you have taken. Some schools accept only TOEFL, some accept either, so make sure that you find that out before you apply. We typically allow a waiver, especially if it's a student who's applying from a country where English is the only primary language, which unfortunately in Colombia is not the case. But a waiver is also available if you received your law degree from a university where the curriculum and the coursework was all taught in English. So if you had gone to just an English-speaking school in Colombia or another part of Latin America, you may be eligible for that language waiver as well. And then lastly, letters of recommendation. This is not a required part of your application here, but especially if you want to be considered for a scholarship, it's strongly recommended. I would say having 2 letters of recommendation can really help make you eligible for a high scholarship. Having one from an academic reference, so a faculty member or someone that you had in the classroom setting for your law program, and then the second coming from a professional reference. So someone who supervised you in your current role or supervised you in an internship or something like that. Some schools, the letter of recommendation is required, so it's important to know the specific requirements of every school because this can vary from institution to institution. So I already went through many of these, but just to review, these are my recommendations of what kinds of questions you should be asking as you research different schools. So what is the average size of the LLM cohort? As I mentioned, this can range from very small, less than 10 students, to more than 200. How much interaction do LLM students have with the JD students, faculty, and the community at and around the institution? What concentration areas are offered? This may be especially important if there's a specific area that you're looking for. So make sure that you are doing that research as you're researching schools. What support is offered for LLM students in securing internships, externships, and/or OPT work opportunities? Does the program offer summer programs for LLM students? Here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we do not offer any summer programs for LLM students. However, it's possible to attend a summer program at another institution and transfer some of those credits back. Some programs actually do offer summer courses at the same university. So that would be an opportunity for you to stay at the same place if that's something that's really important to you. But you may want to consider if summer courses are an option. What support services are offered for international students specifically at the university when it comes to advising, when it comes to offering programs and orientation specifically for you as an international student? And lastly, what are the tuition and fees and what scholarships are available? So these are all things that we've already discussed, but I just wanted to kind of recap and summarize them for you, as I think these are some of the most important questions for you to consider and for you to utilize as you're trying to find the best fit program for you specifically. So that is all I had for you today. If you wanted to contact me later, I'd be happy to answer additional questions or provide you more information about Penn State Dickinson law specifically if you're interested. But we do have a few more minutes before our hour is up, so I am going to open it up for questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to write them in the question box or the chat box, and I will be happy to take a few minutes here and answer some questions. If you don't have any questions, you're welcome to log off. I appreciate you joining today and learning a little bit more about opportunities to study an LLM degree in the US. I hope this was somewhat helpful, and feel free to contact me with any follow-up questions or comments that you might have. I'll give it a few minutes.
To start us off. Many of our Colombian LLM candidates are very interested in human rights and a concentration in LLM related to legal rights. Can you tell the concentration specifically? I know you guys have a really strong program in.
For human rights, yes. So human rights, I think there's a lot of really strong programs in the United States centered around that. When you're looking at a human rights specific concentration, I think you want to look at not only the curriculum and the coursework that's offered, but I think a key component that's important to consider with human rights is also what internship or work opportunities you can find more easily after you finish. So as I'm sure you know, a lot of the nonprofits in the United States that work with human rights are based either in New York City or Washington, D.C. So because of our proximity, we're less than 2 hours from Washington, D.C., less than 3 from New York. Because of that, our students are able to get more easily to interviews for opportunities, to network, to go visit some of these nonprofits, to visit some of these law firms that are doing work in those areas. And so when considering human rights specifically, I would say location is something to really consider because those out of the classroom experiences and real world opportunities are a huge part of the experience that you'll get that'll be helpful in working in human rights long term. Human rights actually is not one of the current concentration offerings that we have. However, we do have a number of human rights courses that students are able to take. So typically students coming in, they may mix their coursework with some international law, maybe some international trial advocacy coursework and some human rights. We try to build a curriculum that would be suitable for the student's specific interest. So there are a number of courses that are very applicable to human rights, even if they're not specifically labeled human rights. So we would work to kind of customize what would be appropriate for someone if they came in and specifically wanted to study with a concentration in human rights. Even though it's not officially one of the ones that we offer, we could certainly put something together that would be applicable. Any other questions? or if anyone has specific questions or concerns about the application process, maybe you've already started applying to schools or you're considering applying next year, I'm happy to give you my opinion or advice if you have some specific questions on how to apply or how to start. I'm not seeing any questions come in. Rachel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll just give it a couple more seconds here if you think of anything. And if not, it looks like we're coming up right at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Okay, here's a question from Francisco. Hi, Francisco. Should I apply if I have not finished my undergraduate program? So I think it depends what year in your program you are. Typically, if you were to pursue an LLM degree right after you graduate, it may be appropriate for you to apply within your last semester or your last year in your program. So for most schools, it's necessary for you, well, for all schools in the United States, it's necessary for you to have completed a law degree in your country prior to starting the program here. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't apply when you're in your last semester or your last couple of semesters. So for example, here at Penn State Dickinson Law, we have a number of applicants who are currently in their last semester of law school now in their home country. And so as long as they graduate on time, which they're planning to do, they would be eligible then to start our program in August this fall. So I would say it may be appropriate for you to do that within your last semester, or if you started your applications earlier, 2 semesters before. But just know that if you are given acceptance, the university will expect to see confirmation of your graduation prior to your arrival on campus. All right, I see one more question here. I'll pull this up. What about if I am thinking to go with my mom so I don't leave her alone while I'm studying? That's a really good question. So I think it's certainly possible for this to happen. Typically, there are dependent visas that can be used for spouses, children, family members to come with you. I think that as you're looking at finances, you definitely want to consider how this would impact your budget. Additional living expenses, additional transportation, all of that will need to be considered. I think it's also important to ask the universities that you're applying for what services they offer, if any, to family members that you may bring with you. So we have a couple of students who have been admitted to my program here for the fall semester who are looking to potentially come with their spouse or children, in which case, as we help to provide insight on housing and properties that are available for rent within walking distance of campus, we keep that in mind to ensure that it's a suitable living space for the number of people that are coming with them. So make sure that you know if the university will offer you any support or suggestions for you to help make that transition easy and manageable for you and whoever you're bringing with you. Good question. All right.
I have one more question before we go.
Sure.
Regarding the LSAC platform.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you guys obviously don't manage the platform, but you deal with it on a regular basis. Do you what would be maybe the most common error that students commit on the LSAC platform, or maybe something that's one of the trickier?
So you cut out a little bit at the end there, Rachel, but I think I heard enough of your question. So what I heard you ask is about the LSAC platform, specifically in applying. That is completely facilitated through LSAC organization. And so because we just use the platform, we're not actually facilitating it. I think you were asking what are some of the most common mistakes that applicants make through the LSAC platform, which is a really good question. I would say it's really important as you are applying to make sure you're applying to the correct schools. So the way LSAC works is you create your online profile and your general application that has all of your demographic information, address, et cetera, et cetera. And then you select what schools you want to apply. And there are some universities in the United States that have more than one law school. Penn State actually is one of them. So Penn State University has 2 different law schools. Penn State Dickinson Law, we're the original Penn State Law School located in Carlisle. And there is another law school that was built more recently. So that's called Penn State Law. So a common confusion specifically with us is that students may apply for Penn State Law when actually they intended to apply for Penn State Dickinson Law. So make sure you are aware of the exact location and the exact name of the schools you're applying for, because there's a couple other universities that offer more than one law school as well. Like Indiana University, they have 2 separately accredited law schools as well. So making sure that you're putting in the exact, accurate, correct information to ensure that the schools that you intend to apply receive your information. I think that's one common mistake that I see here, just because of the confusion with having 2 Penn State law schools. Besides that, I would say probably the biggest frustration that applicants experience with LSAC is the fact that the certification, the credential service, the credential service of reviewing your transcripts can take a while. And so if you're not planning ahead, and let's say you apply, you complete your application, you submit your cover letter, your personal statement, your letters of recommendation the day before a deadline, you're going to miss that deadline if you haven't already submitted your transcripts before, because that certification process, as I mentioned, takes about 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer. And so that can be a frustration for applicants that don't realize that they needed to start it so early. So I would say that's probably the biggest general confusion that students tend to face as they're going through that application process. All right, well, we're a little over time, so I think we can call it quits for today, but thank you again, everyone, for joining. Feel free to take note of my email and reach out to me if you have any additional questions later, even if it may not be about Penn State Dickinson Law, but just general LLM questions in the US, I'm happy to answer them. So feel free to reach out. And thank you greatly to Education USA and Rachel specifically for helping to coordinate this webinar event today.